I've been on my allotment as a tenant for about 11 years now, and it's most noticeable. Over that period of time, I've been able to grow less and less vegetables without the added protection of some form of net, so that I get quite a lot of inquiries about the stuff that I use. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at my nets, covers, and the structures that I use during the growing season. As you enter the world of gardening, probably your first encounter of any form of crop protection will be the humble garden fleece, or it's sometimes sold as horticultural fleece. It's spun polypropylene and it's quite tough. It's sold by the density and the weight, the most common one being 15 grams per square metre, or you might see it as 15 GSM. I tend to go for the more dense one, which is 30 GSM, and that gives that slightly better protection. 15 gram will probably save you down to 0 or slightly below, whereas the 30 gram will go down to -5, -6. It's a very, very lightweight material, as you can see. And those of you who grow the potatoes early, if you get some popping up the ground, there's a risk of frost. Just pop this directly over the top, put a few stones, bricks, or clip it down, peg it, whatever you like, and that'll save your crop from getting burnt and that. If you do feel it will actually damage the crop, you can always put a few canes in with bottles on the top, upturned, and just put this over there to prop it up. But I've never had any issue with this damaging the crops at all. As you can see, it lets plenty of light through. It's also a good wind barrier, so you can use it over hoop houses or stuff like that. And it'll let moisture through, rain, but also protect the crop from any heavy rain as well. And underneath there will be a slight microclimate, so it'll just add a few extra degrees to coax those plants along. You can buy this in different widths and lengths, and it's quite easily with a pair of sharp scissors to cut it to the required size. It is UV stabilised, and at the end of the season you can pop it in the washing machine, give it a wash, make sure it's thoroughly dry, then pack it away from any rodents and that, and this will last you for many years. As I said, I use the 30 grams per square metre, and I purchased mine from a company called Gardening Naturally, and I'll put a link to their website underneath if you want to take a look. So onto the debris netting. This is the commando net for the allotment. It can take quite a lot of abuse and still come out good. Available in varying widths from 1 metre, 2 metre and 3 metre. You may even get it wider, and you usually can buy it in a running length, so you might have a 3 metre wide by 8 metres long or something, or if you really need a lot, it's probably cheaper to buy the 50 metre roll. And this is available from most sites like Amazon or eBay, and that, but just need to shop around. Available again in various colours. This is the green one, as you can see. They do it in red, black, yellow, blue and white. The very first one I had, it was the white one, and I used it to cover the full length of my bed, which is 6 metres long, 2.5 metres wide and 1 metre high at each side. And that was the cheapest way I could cover the net to give protection. At the time I was growing brassicas, and I also used it for growing onions, although saying that it didn't stop the allium leaf miner, they still got through. At certain intervals, it might be 1 metre, I'm not sure, you'll see this line here which looks as though it joins the nets, but there's extra large holes in, and that there is used to fix the net to the scaffold poles on the building site. So you may want to actually sew these up just to get a bit more extra protection. When I bought my net, I couldn't get the right width, so what I ended up doing is tying a wire on the fence, moving it along, putting the pole in, and I joined 2 pieces over the top and I sewed it by hand. Of course, if you've got a sewing machine now, you can easily whiz this through in seconds. When I put it in use originally, say for the brassicas, it did do a good job, but even the white one, it does block a certain amount of light out, and I could see the plants struggling a bit. So I've still got mine, although I don't really use it in anger now, except on the odd occasion. I tend to use the Inset Mesh. But say on the odd occasion, if I know I've got plants out there under the insect mesh and we're going to have a cold night or a heavy frost, I'll actually put the white version of this over the top, and that does give an extra bit of protection, and of course windbreak. So plenty of things you can do with this. Say it's tough, peg it down, cut it. If you do cut it, you may need to have to seal the edge with a soldering iron, even a lighter or something like that, because it will actually fray. But this is a good piece of kit for the allotment. Here's some debris netting I have at the moment, stretched over some plastic pipe, and it's providing ideal shade and protection for my garlic. Another use you can use is pin it to the edge of your greenhouse, and that will provide adequate shade against the fierce sun. And so we come to the butterfly net. This is probably the most widely used net that I have on my allotment. It could be in use up to 12 months of the year. Once the brassicas go out in April, it sees all the year out, including over the Christmas and the winter periods, because the Brussels sprouts still need protection. So it sees rain, snow, sleet, sunshine, everything. The piece that I have covering the main bed is probably 5 years old, and say it's been out most winters and it still looks as good as new. It's extremely tough. I mentioned in the last clip that the debris netting was probably the commando of the garden nets. Well, this is up there with it, extremely strong. It's about a 4.5 mil mesh size. It's UV stabilised, and it's polyethylene, the material is, I think. And it comes in at around 60 grams per square metre, so it's a fair hefty weight for it. This is probably the largest size mesh that I use on my allotment. I have seen other things before where the mesh is bigger and birds have got caught, so that tends to put me off. This does keep out butterflies and pigeons, which are the two main enemies we have on the brassicas. You can buy this in up to 4 metre lengths, and say I'll get this from a company called Easy Nets up in Hartlepool. A chap named Keith Morgan, who I've got to know, and he's kindly issued me with a discount for our viewers, 15%. I'll put the code in at the bottom, so if you're interested, either go on the website or give Keith a call. You can use this not only for covering brassicas, but also soft fruits as well. I've got some over some hoops on my strawberry bed, and also you could use it for covering fruit trees as well. So very versatile, extremely strong. This is the butterfly net. The final soft covering we're going to look at is the insect mesh. You might be more familiar with the name Enviromesh, which is actually a registered trade name for a company called Agrolan for their insect mesh. This is a piece of their stuff, and the mesh size of this is 1.35 millimeters. Here in the Midlands, we're plagued with a pest called the allium leaf miner. It's first identified here, and gradually it's moved across the country, and it does devastate the allium family, onions, leeks, shallots and that sort of thing. I have had this covering the onions, and the pest did get through and it goes buries down and tunnels down into the bulb. However, now on the market there's a much finer version of that, and this mesh size is 0.8 of a millimetre. Using this, I've never had no problems with the allium leaf miner, and I also use this to cover my carrot tanks, and that does protect against the carrot root fly. If I can, I'll try and put 2 pictures of the 2 different types of net so you can actually compare the mesh difference. This is ultraviolet stabilised polyethylene, and it comes in at 70 grams per square metre. It lets about 95% of light through it. I've had this for about 4 years now, and so I've never had no issues with pests getting through. It does withstand the weather quite well. It is quite tough, but again, if you do cut it, you do need to seal the edges because it will eventually fray. So just get something like a, say, hot soldering iron or something like that. You can buy this fine stuff up to a width of 5.3 meters, and you can buy it in a running length and all. I'll get this from the same place as I got the other netting from, and that's easynets.co.uk, I'll put all the details along the bottom of the screen. So that's about it for the mesh. Now we'll start having a look at some structures. Another piece of kit that I use as a protection is this semi-flexible stuff. It's primarily done as a roofing sheet, so I should imagine it's quite UV stabilised, or over a period of time it will eventually crack. This is, I think it's 1.8 metres long and it's about 650 millimetres wide. And what I primarily use this for is protection for my peas. When I put them out into the ground from the gutters for the first time, I'll give them a cover in this for 2 or 3 weeks just to get the roots settled and give them a bit more extra temperature. What I've done with this, I've actually drilled holes in, I don't know if you'll see there, and that there obviously gives some airflow. It also lets moisture through, and I also use the nozzle of a hose pipe to water the plants without having to disturb them. It is quite flexible, as you can see. It'll bend, and by putting a couple of supports at each side, it keeps it in that curved position. And I just put a couple of boards at each end. And as I say, these are available from most local DIY stores. For me, one of the best hard coverings you use on the allotment is the polycarbonate sheet. This has replaced most of the glass on my allotment. In fact, the only thing I've got on there now, glass, is the greenhouse and also the coverings for the coal frame. In the past, I've used double glazed toughened units, and I fell foul of them when you catch them and it just shatters and covers the soil in shards of glass, which takes years to get out. But this, you can use it in many forms, different thicknesses, different sizes and whatever. You can get 2 pieces together, prop up and form a real hard, tough cloche, and it will stand the wind and old weathers. In fact, one of the best examples I've got is these. These are my carrot tanks, as you probably know. And during the end of the winter, I do a cut and chop. I chop all the foliage down and put these on the top, just to keep a bit of temperature into the soil. And also it keeps all the horrendous rain we've had just recently, because if you let the carrots get wet at this time of the year, they'll suck the moisture up that much and split. So by chopping the tops off, putting this on, I've still got some airflow underneath, and say this does provide a good covering. I'll just lift the cover off now. As you say, we're still into March, and these are my carrots. They're still doing strong. I'll just lift it one out, and as you can see, that's okay. Regards getting the polycarb to bite, it's quite expensive, but at the moment there seems to be a phase where people are having conservatory roofs converted into either solid roofs or tiles. So if you know anybody what's a roof fitter, or even have a look around the skips on the various sites and that, you're bound to find some sheets of this, and say it's well worth connecting. You can even cut it quite easily with a saw. So polycarbonate, well worth it. Plastic barrier fencing is something you also see quite often on the allotment. Again, this was derived from the building and construction industry. I bought this, I think it was in a 50-metre roll many years ago, and I only use it as a container for the potatoes when they grow, because as they get going the haulms tend to spread out, and being next to a path you can walk by and easily snap them off. So I popped this around there just to contain them a bit. Over the years it does get brittle, as you can see, so when this comes to the end of life, I've probably got about 20 metres left. I shan't be using this again, and instead I'll be replacing it with the debris netting together with these fence pins, the line pins which you saw earlier. MDPE pipe is quite common on allotments, and it's relatively inexpensive to buy. The blue stuff here is designed for water, and you sometimes see it in yellow and all, which is for gas. Available in different diameters. I think this is about 25 millimeters, and you can get it in quite large, and popular with people who build their own polytunnels by putting scaffold poles in, and the large diameter stuff slides nicely over the top. So this is 25 mil, and I use it primarily for hoop houses. There's a number of ways you can use it. You can actually build a wooden framework, partially drill some holes, slot this in, and probably put a screw in to retain it and keep the shape. A number of these, a netting or a bit of fleece stretches over nicely to form a permanent cover. Semi-permanently, I use it on my carrot tanks where it pushes in, and again put the mesh over the top. But at the end of the season I just lift it out, allowing me to put the polycarb sheets on like you saw earlier, and that is the carrot protection. And also I use it as a little bit of a work surface. Or you can go into the soil. Now some people will put a little iron bar in, so it's sticking out the ground by that much, and thread the pipe over each side. Or some people will just plug this straight into the soil. The downside of that is that the hole gets blocked up and eventually it's solid in there. What I like to do with mine is when you cut it, it can be quite flexible. So I block the end, usually with a bit of plasticine or something, and very carefully get some boiling water and pour it down the hole, and eventually it softens it up, and you can then more or less straighten it out. In the summer it's much easier, obviously, because the sun makes this hot and then makes it more flexible. But this is the MDPE pipe, very, very useful. One final thing I'm going to talk about, and that's how I build the structures to carry the nets, both for the brassicas and also the alliums with the insect mesh. First thing we need is these uprights, and these are called line pins or lamp pins. Use them in road construction to fence off areas which they've digged to keep the people away, and also put some plastic barrier netting on. I'm quite fortunate in that the company what makes these is not too far from where I live, so I'm able to visit the factory. They're called Black Country pins. They do these in different lengths, different diameters, and also with different shapes on the top. You can have that with a plain top or a bigger hook or whatever. For the rest of the stuff, including the cross members and also the ones which go along the length, I'm going to put a still photograph up and talk you through it. It'll be far easier because I've actually broken the big cage down at the moment. So let's move on to that. So this photograph was taken the end of this season, just as breaking the framework down. This is where I grew all the brassicas. There's still one or two little winter cabbages in there, as you can see. Going to the line pins, which we've just been speaking about, there's 4 down each side of the bed, and they are set at 1 metre high. What I've got is a piece of wood with a 1 metre mark on, and I hold that against the line pin and bang it down until the top of the pin reaches the mark. These pins have got a spike on, so they go into the soil quite easily. Now the bar going across there, one each side, that there is electrical conduit where the wires actually go down on the electric installations. These are in a 3 metre length, and there's 2 joined together with a little screwed coupler. It's just a matter of twisting the 2 bars together. It does look a bit bent there, but I think the one of the line pins is pushed forward, but they're quite flexible. These are galvanised and all, so they don't go rusty. So I've got 2 of those. You can get these from anywhere, the DIY shops like Screwfix or Tool Station. If you across the pond in the USA, Canada, and that, I suppose Home Depot and stuff like that will sell them. So that's the uprights and the long crossbars. Now the rails going across the centre, these are rainwater gutters, and I think I've got some round, half round ones and some rectangular shaped ones and all. All I've done there is measured the length, and I just drill a hole in there. It's probably about 12-15 millimetres, and they just actually hook onto these ends of the line pins, and they do form a good support for the net. The good thing about these is being smooth. When you pull the nets across, it doesn't snag at all. One year we had quite a lot of snow, and these did give way in the middle. They folded and bent in the middle. So what I do now, I've got an extra line pin and just fit it in roughly in the centre of the bar, in the centre of the bed, and that there sits underneath that curve of the trough, the gutter, and it does give the bit of extra support. So that there is the way I build the framework for the beds. I've got two of these frameworks. There's one that's like this is for the brassicas, and the other one is more or less identical, and that there houses all the alliums, the onions, the leeks and shallots and stuff like that. Right, let's get back out on the allotment. Well, I hope that answered some of the questions you may have about the nets and coverings that I use on my allotment. Even more so, maybe try some of that yourself and do a few tweaks to suit your own individual needs. If you're new around here, how about considering subscribing? There's a button down there, press that, ring the bell and also the thumbs up. There's plenty more content to come like this. I'm Nigel Dukes and you've been watching the MuddyBootz allotment.